everyone. Happy Earth Day. What's AI's role in it? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Our week is rolling along. I just kind of view this week as the week before RSA conference. And besides doing Techstrong Gang, the rest of my week is pretty much taken up with preparations for all of the various things that Techstrong will be doing at RSA. Of course, our DevSecOps event on Monday. We're on Broadcast Alley all week. We're sponsoring a few parties at night, speakers dinners, and all kinds of good stuff. We're going to be out there in strength along with our Futurum brethren. I think we'll probably be 10 to 12 people strong at RSA this week. So very, very exciting. But we still have a whole week before RSA. So let's focus in on what we've got on this beautiful Tuesday. Let me introduce you to our gang. First of all, joining us down Austin way, the quintessential Texan. He gave up his sweaters. It must be warm there. Our friend Robert Reeves. Hey, Robert, what's happening?
Oh, not much. It's very excited because yes, it is getting warmer. But in preparation for Earth Day, I converted my yard to all native plants and got rid of the zoysia, which was not working. And we went with buffalo grass and wildflowers, and they are popping right now. It's beautiful.
Very cool. Good for you. Good work, man. All right. Moving from Texas to Hudson, Ohio. I don't know if he's got any native plants there. I don't know what kind of plants he's growing. I'm not going to ask, but he's the founder of Tech Field Day, my friend Stephen Foskett. Hey, Stephen.
Hello, everybody. Yes, and actually you said moving. Well, that's what I was doing all weekend. We moved to the village, and so we have a lovely little house in the village now, and now comes the fun of trying to figure out what's that native plant, and is that a weed or is that a flower, which is the most fun when you move into a new house.
Absolutely. Well, sometimes a weed could be a flower. Be it smell, well, whatever. I lost my Shakespeare quote. Let's move over to Harrison or our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vazard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. Earth Day, of course, is an opportunity to celebrate baseball because, well, it's played on grass and dirt.
Play ball.
That works.
Build it, they will come. All right. And then here in our audience, speaking of Earth Day and all things green and sustainable, is our Echo Insights advisor and editor, Bonnie Schneider. Hey, Bonnie, how are you?
I'm great. Good to be here.
Happy Earth Day.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's jump into it, Mike. This Earth Day is a little different in that, like everything
Today,
else, AI.
We're going to do something different. We're going right to Bonnie, who's going to kind of introduce her segment and go from there.
Fantastic. Go ahead, Bon.
Well, it's interesting. We talk about Earth Day every year, and typically when it comes to big tech, we'll talk about their goals. How far along are they to the 2030 goals? What have they done? And I'm still going to do that in this upcoming report. But now things have shifted where when we talk about big tech, we also have to talk about AI and energy demand because what we're expecting in terms of energy use for data centers, every time I check the projections, it's even higher than it was, a few months ago. So let's take a look at big tech, some of the innovations they're doing on this Earth Day and how just looking at sustainability might be redefined starting with this Earth Day as we go forward and look towards the energy demand of AI.
Go to the tape.
Okay, now I'll come back.
Now we come back to Bonnie.
In 3, 2.
Earth Day 2025 does mark changes in this goal to be more sustainable. We've already seen some companies change and adjust their goals and their timelines because of the demands of AI. So it's an ongoing report, but I think this is the first year where this Earth Day, it's really in prime focus.
Absolutely. And, you're right, Bonnie. It seems every time we turn around, there's another 100 billion here, 200 billion there being pledged for these AI data centers. And Microsoft's made a deal with 3 Mile Island. to buy nuclear power from there. That doesn't sound like it'll end well. But, in light of Earth Day, and also, look, not to be political, but the fact of the matter is we're hearing all kinds of rumors about many of our environmental protection laws being rescinded or suspended, though I don't know how you could do that without an act of Congress. And for the sake of drill baby drill, in spite of the fact that solar and wind seem to be really catching, tailwinds, no pun intended. I don't know, panel, what do you think about?
Well, let me start with where these data centers are being built is kind of surprising to me. And I'm even going to concede a point here to Stephen. We were on a show a few weeks back talking about data centers in Ireland, and he was suggesting the west coast of Ireland. And I kind of said that's unlikely given the fact that everybody is in Dublin and wants to go to Europe. And sure enough, over the weekend, I get a news bulletin out of Mayo in the west of Ireland talking about how they're building a data center in the west of Ireland. And here we go. And at the same time, they're in the Midwest too, in large ways, farm country, and even down in Texas, you're seeing these data centers showing up in odd locations. Stephen, why are these data centers not where we think they might have been in the past?
Well, I still think that data center location is primarily driven by the location of end users and also by the nexus of communication. So one of the things that Western Ireland has is that's where a lot of cables land. And so it makes sense to have data centers there. Some of the other places as well, it may not be obvious, but there's actually quite a lot of telecom in Columbus, Ohio, and in Central Texas. And I think that that's one reason that these things are being built there. But I do feel that increasingly we're going to start seeing people locating data centers where the power is and where the environment is. They need water. You don't think that data centers need water, but they do. Chip fabs also need incredible amounts of water. So it makes sense to locate things there. And if you're putting them in the Midwest, if you're putting them in Texas, I was flying into Austin last week and I got Houston, I got a beautiful view of a massive solar farm north of Houston. I think that this goes to the point that I've been trying to make here, which is no amount of politics is going to derail the green energy future simply because solar makes a lot of sense, especially in places like Central Texas, where there's a lot of sun and a lot of land. And if you can put up solar panels and get free electricity out of that, well, that's going to make a lot of sense. Same with Iowa, where there's a lot of wind, and so there's a ton of wind energy there. No amount of anti-wind agitating by politicians is going to derail the fact that if you built this tower and the thingy turns and you get the electricity out of it, then you're going to use that. And frankly, if you build a power plant where there's a whole bunch of coal or a whole bunch of natural gas, I imagine people probably use that too. But overall, I think a lot of these things are driven not by politics or even explicit corporate strategy, but by externalities like where are the customers, where's the telecom, where's the power, where's the water, where's the land, and all of these things I think are coming together to make green energy more effective and more widespread.
Robert, we were talking off camera a little bit before we started today about the situation specifically in Texas. My youngest son is a sportscaster for KTAB, KTAB in Abilene, Texas, deep in big country, as they call it. And when I go out there to visit him, driving from, Dallas, Fort Worth to Abilene, once you get a little bit out of Fort Worth, into big country, the hills are alive with the sound of wind turbines. Well, they don't really make a lot of sound, but there are wind turbines as far as the eye can see. And they're actually building a huge, huge new data center in Abilene that they think is going to turn the entire economy. Right now, Abilene, the biggest employer is this big Air Force base right there. So a lot of
and the one university there,
Abilene Christian. Bradley covers it well. If you're looking for ACU coverage, turn into KTAB. But that being said, I saw an interesting report that for all we think of in Texas with guys from the Flintstones driving cars with the big longhorns, on the front and everything. Stephen remembers that. The fact of the matter is that most new energy coming online out of Texas is solar and wind, much
That's
more
right.
than oil or gas.
That's right.
And the fracking and all of that. Now, I'm sure I don't think Greg Abbott's jumping out of his wheelchair, waving flags to promote solar and wind energy,
He doesn't have to because it's happening.
whether he wants it or not.
Well, geographically, if you look at that part of Texas, that's right before we get to the High Plains Mesa that stretches all through New Mexico and the southern part of Colorado and those sorts of things. And where it goes from the plains, Midwestern plains up to that is a perfect place to put turbines because that's where it captures the wind. Now, if you are living in that part of Texas, from Abilene up to the Panhandle, and further west, what you're going to notice as a homeowner is that after 9 p.m., you get free energy. They have deals where the energy providers, because they have an excess of energy, that's where you can run your dryer and those sorts of things. And so folks that are building data centers, and especially for AI, which is huge consumer of power, well, you need water, you need power, and you need cheap land. And so this is just all these things coming together has led to two areas where you're seeing growth in Texas for data centers. One is that part of Texas from, Abilene around I-20 and up to the Panhandle, but also in South Texas where there is an excess of wind right on the coast and solar, but also LNG, natural gas. They're pulling that out, and there's a reason why they built those LNG terminals into the Gulf, where you don't have to come into port to fill up ships. And so and also close to the Gulf, and if you have an excess of power, desalination makes sense. And so I do agree that in the past we have seen, and I'm by no means an expert on data centers or telecom, but we have certainly seen that we put data centers around where our big peering points are. But now with AI, we can, have models built, have it work in the data center, and then we can take that model out of the data center. Once we get the data in there, it's just going to work. And so it's mainly about power and water and cheap land. And we've seen the beginnings of this going back 10 years where cattle ranchers have leased out their land to put in turbines. So not only are they making money off the cattle, but also the leases for power. And you're starting to see more and more. And in the past, we saw this with oil and gas. You would have grazing land with a oil rig or a natural gas rig, and now it is wind turbines and solar lifted up so that the cattle can graze around it. It's very interesting. If you just look at the press, you wouldn't think, and conventional wisdom, but it is happening. Anecdotally, I know of several landowners in South Texas that are getting crazy offers on their property for data centers.
And I'll just point out that it's not just anecdotal either. You're absolutely right, Robert. Wind power, Texas is the #1 producer of wind power in the United States, and Texas is the #2 producer of solar power in the United States as a percentage of consumption, only slightly behind California. And Texas actually doubled their solar production in 2024 alone, which is wild. They're #1 in the country deploying solar because it makes sense.
That's right. Money.
Well, so Bonnie, what's your assessment here? I mean, because you will read a lot of coverage out there about how AI and these data centers may not be good for the earth, but can we sustain this?
that's remains a ongoing question. A few weeks ago, we talked about the possibility of nuclear, that a lot of companies were investing in that, but Stephen pointed out that's not a short-term solution; it's more of a long-term one. So I think that it's going to be a balancing game. They need as much energy as they can get. Solar and wind work and make sense. Now they have intermittent properties where they're not constant, so that isn't an issue. But I think just the fact what you were talking about in Texas, you don't see everyone outside of Texas talking about that or knowing about that, but I think it's good that we're explaining that. Another area for power that's being explored when we were talking about being geographically aware is here in Florida, and then up in New England, they're doing a lot more research with hydropower and current power, the power of the ocean currents to create energy. There's actually some experiments and things that are going on right here in South Florida with that. So it's wave energy, right? So I think wherever they can get it, the need will be there. And then the flip side, of course, is that we're also talking about often is how efficient can this AI be? Is it going to improve on its own and teach itself to be more efficient? So we're watching both of those, but it's still a big unknown factor because, as I said, that energy demand just keeps growing. Even just in this conversation, as you were talking about all these new data centers, I was thinking about that. Wow, I hadn't heard about that one and that one. So there's probably so many globally that this is happening.
Now, there is one way that politics could get in the way here, and that is that most solar panels are produced in a place called China that you may have heard of, and would be subject to punitive tariffs under both administrations in the US and in China, and that could cause problems. So I will say, despite all my enthusiasm for this as a business decision, if those solar panels cost 125% more than they ought to, then that's going to really eat into the market for them.
They would never do anything like that, would they, Stephen?
I hope not.
But there might be an interesting windmill smuggling business coming up soon.
They're
no,
real
yeah,
hard to
wind.
smuggle.
Yeah.
Real
They're pretty
hard.
big.
There's actually a big wind turbine factory in a magical land called Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh,
And so you will see those giant blades rolling down the highway here in Ohio. So perhaps that can be homegrown.
I wonder what it would take for us to develop solar panels, solar film, solar generating materials here in the US.
Well, there was an attempt to do that under President Obama, and it became a major scandal after the funds were mismanaged. And I don't know if you remember the whole
I think I vaguely
cylinder
remember
thing.
something, yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have that. We don't make those.
Shame. Anyway, an excellent opening for this lovely Earth Day. Guys, we only got one home on this planet and we all share it. So keep that in mind. Let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We're going to come back and talk about a big tech field day going on this week. Stephen will lead us off on that. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
So as we were just discussing, the growth of AI has really driven the growth of data center and IT infrastructure spend for the last year or two. And that doesn't seem to be slowing down. We on the Tech Field Day side here have created an AI infrastructure field day event because we figured that there would be interest in sharing some of the news about what's going on the IT infrastructure side with supporting AI applications. And to say that that was successful is quite an understatement. Many Tech Field Day events are 2 days long. This one's 4 days long. That's the kind of response that we've gotten. And in fact, we already have about a half a dozen companies signed up for the next one that we haven't even announced yet. because frankly, there's that much excitement and interest in building infrastructure to support AI. So we are going to be talking over the next few days here, starting today when this episode airs. You'll be able to see these presentations on Techstrong TV. We're talking to a wide variety of companies, not just the traditional cloud companies. Yes, Google Cloud is live all day today, but also more of the infrastructure companies that you may say, wait a second, what's their AI angle? So we've got Juniper, Solidigm, Phison, Nutanix, companies like that are going to be talking about basically how they're making their corner of infrastructure better support AI. I've been talking about this quite a lot from a storage perspective on our Utilizing Tech podcast series, which focuses on basically how does storage support AI. It's all about data. And frankly, a lot of this spend is about data, whether it's data storage, data retrieval, data management, manipulation, processing, et cetera. I can't wait to hear what these companies have to say, because frankly, it's in everybody's interest to make AI supporting infrastructure more efficient, to move the technology forward. Because right now, we're actually not making great use of infrastructure. One of the things that came up last time at our AI Field Day event was the fact that on average, production AI hardware, the GPUs, those incredibly expensive GPUs, only 23% utilized, even when they're in production. So you hear about these companies spending billions of dollars for GPUs, and yet they still have 3/4 of the time those things are idle. Why are they idle? Is that, because they don't have a use case? Is it because they don't have data feeding them? Is it because they don't have optimal data pipelines or optimal software? Well, it's all of those things. And so all of these companies are all working together to basically make better use of the resources that we have, while they're also at the same time deploying ever more resources. So it's going to be really interesting to learn about this. I'm curious what you all think. Had you thought much about the infrastructure that supports AI and supports these GPUs?
Well, I'm thinking that most of the data center is going to need to be re-architected, whether it's on premise or in the cloud, because if every application is making some use of AI, the infrastructure needs to be optimized. And most of what's out there today wasn't built with AI in mind. And to your point about utilization rates, they were abysmal even before AI, and now they're just getting worse and more expensive. I can't help but wonder, though. I feel like as I look at it, we're doing all this stuff in a piecemeal fashion, and I'm wondering if there is a need for a more holistic conversation and approach, because otherwise we wind up with a couple of GPUs over here, but oh yeah, now we got to fix the network. Oh wait, now we got to fix the storage systems. It seems like we're kind of doing this hodgepodge thing that never works out well.
To me, this is a case of it's always the guys who sell the picks and shovels that make the money in the gold rush. Right?
Yep. And look who's selling these picks and shovels. You got the server companies, you got HPE and Dell and Lenovo, you got the storage companies, you got Juniper and Cisco and Broadcom and these companies. Yeah, they're certainly making a lot of money right now. And of course, Big Daddy in green, NVIDIA, is making a lot of money selling picks and shovels.
Well, gosh, if only there was some way that we could maybe pool our resources together, and maybe one company would have a bunch of GPUs and people could use them as they need them. If only, yeah, like something like that, where you could spin it up, spin it down, but I don't know if that concept would ever work. I don't
Sounds
know.
awful cloudy to me. I'm not sure I'm
You'd
on
have a
board
tough
with
time
that.
selling it to the mainstream.
Yeah, it's just, look, I love technology, and luckily I've been around long enough to be able to see patterns evolve over and over again. And I love how we have found solutions for problems that we've had in the past for analogs. It's good. Yes, companies are not utilizing them, but they are going to increase and get more efficient. It's something that this is an opportunity for companies to build startups around this. And as a, former 2-time startup founder, I would encourage anybody looking at this space to look at previous analogs and apply it to this new space, because they've already run the traps and figured out what solution, how to market, how to sell. You just need to build your solution and follow a well-tread path.
And well, to Mike's point too, the big cloud providers are absolutely looking at this from a holistic perspective. I mean, Google and companies like them they've got their own switch hardware, they've got their own AI accelerator hardware. They're deploying a complete soup to nuts, top to bottom infrastructure stack. I mean, you look at Azure, that's powering OpenAI, among others. There are a lot of companies that are building hardware and software to serve AI, and it is interesting to say, wait a second, are they? What is the result of that? Are they able to deliver this at a consistently lower price point than cobbling something together? And that doesn't sound good, but than building a best of breed solution of your own. Or are there other reasons that you would want to build it on your own in-house instead of running it in the cloud? And I think that there's a lot of sensitivity as well on that point.
So you bring up a good point, Stephen, and I think that's going to be a back and forth kind of battle. The same way to Robert's point about, hey, maybe there's this thing called the cloud. Even though we've been in the cloud era now for going on 20 years, right? 2005, 2006. We still, we're just approaching a tipping point where there's probably more infrastructure in cloud than in data centers. I don't know if we're there yet, though. I think there's probably still more in private data centers than in public cloud. So, in terms of that, I think it's the same thing here. Yes, the hyperscalers do enough scale where it pays for them to develop their own ecosystem, their own switches, their own hardware, their own, much like Google kind of reinvented the server market when they started using their own servers, right?
Yeah, now look at OCP.
Right.
Yeah.
Michael Dell still rues that day. But, so I think that's going to be a battle that goes back and forth like a tug of war. You'll see it. Certainly people who don't have that kind of scale, it doesn't pay for them to develop their own complete ecosystem. They'll buy COTS hardware.
You've already seen AWS and Google and Microsoft build stacks of their cloud infrastructure that you can deploy in an on-premise environment. So logically, they would do the same thing with their AI editions of that platform.
Yeah, but then there's this thing called lock-in. And I think a lot of the smaller people want to avoid lock-in. But here's another.
If I get locked into Dell, HP, or Amazon or Google, what difference does it make?
No, because you know what? If I want to switch from Dell to HPE to Lenovo, it used to be in the world, right? The underneath the nameplate, there was a lot of similarities, and it wasn't as a big deal to switch. Versus, I'm buying into the Google stack. Buying into the Google stack is quite another story. You can't just migrate.
Well, and a lot of that lock-in is software driven too.
Yeah.
The reason that people choose, for example, Google versus Amazon versus Azure for building AI applications or other applications is because they are buying into that software stack. I mean, Google has spent tons of money trying to woo developers to come into the Google Cloud. And I would say that, at least from my perspective, Google's primary pitch to the world is our stuff is developer friendly. Amazon as well. I mean, if you go to AWS reInvent, just look around there. It's all about developers. And then that, of course, is Microsoft's history too. So I feel like a lot of them are using software rather than hardware to try to drive people to their platforms. But one of the crazy facts,
NVIDIA, Stephen, right?
Absolutely. Well, it wasn't for CUDA. NVIDIA, where would they be if that hadn't been the development target for all these AI models? And that's one reason, for example, that Intel hasn't had more success. It's not necessarily a hardware problem as much as it is an API problem, because people would prefer to use the NVIDIA stack to deploy their models, and there you go. And attempts to woo developers in a different direction have not always worked out very well. And NVIDIA's here they are. But one of the things I wanted to point out is that if you look at some of these traditional AI infrastructure companies, one of the surprising things that we learn at Tech Field Day when we're talking to them is that they are actually powering the clouds as well, the hyperscalers. And so we were at HPE last week. They can't talk about it, but I would guess that a significant portion of HPE's server revenue is driven building racks of cloud, for HPC and for cloud service providers. I mean, HPE rules the HPC market. They build most of the supercomputers. And the same thing with some of these other companies. You look at Juniper, and actually here's another dark horse. There's a company, Keysight, that makes testing equipment, and they have specific AI testing improving products. And it's basically a product for the hyperscalers. To be honest, it is the product that the hyperscalers are leaning on to make sure that their products are efficient. There's basically a market of 20, but it's like a huge market because these companies are buying so much. So even these traditional companies, I mean, Keysight is derived from the original garage, the Hewlett and Packard garage. That's how far back they trace their roots. And yet here they are developing products targeted specifically at clients like AWS and Azure and Alibaba and so on. It's kind of amazing to see.
Robert, I thought I just heard a plaintive cry for an open source alternative to CUDA managed by a consortium so we don't get locked into all this stuff. But I don't know. Is that possible?
I thought, isn't CUDA open?
Yeah, but it's still NVIDIA.
Right. Well, we certainly have OPIA, which is Intel donated that to the Linux Foundation. And that's saying certainly enterprise model for delivering AI solutions. There are things out there. I have always cautioned people that are concerned about vendor lock-in to use open source because it is a standard, and you have to be a bit militant about not buying into other parts of a vendor's ecosystem that does lock you in. So, for example, Kubernetes. Well, then you're starting to use proprietary services at that cloud provider. Great, you can go to another Kubernetes service, but you're still locked in on these proprietary services. So you have to be a bit militant, and maybe not militant, perhaps aware. We'll say aware. Be very aware of what you're choosing. Yeah, but it is. Look, I'm just very happy to see that customers are concerned about vendor lock-in. Because there was a time where, not too long ago, where you use solutions based on who your CIO or CTO played golf with most recently. And I'm very happy to see that developers are driving this. And my recommendation for developers who are picking solutions is not just pick on ease of use. Certainly that should be a concern, and features and functionality, but also what it means to the business. Be aware of what these choices, the impact that these choices have on your company, and be a good steward and leader at your enterprise.
Man, Robert, you sound like a Tech Field Day delegate. We got to talk.
Would love to. It's just, look, I really want developers to live their best life and enjoy what they do. But at the same time, I don't want to see them or the business paint themselves into a corner that's very difficult to get out of, because I've been there and it's not a happy place to be. And I want people to be in happy places.
End this up in this way. I'm waiting to see an AI infrastructure glut, because we'll overbuild as we always do, and then, that'll even itself out too. When it'll be, I don't know. But anyway, Stephen, I do know when AI Infrastructure Field Day is. It's on immediately after the gang today. Well, I don't know if it's immediately after, but after the gang today. So if we've whet your appetite or whet your whistle for any of this, stay tuned on Techstrong TV. Today, you can catch the AI Infrastructure Day live from Silicon Valley on Techstrong TV or on YouTube, on the Tech Field Day YouTube channel. There it goes. That's recorded next week. Yes.
Yeah, but it's going to be live streaming on Techstrong TV all the rest of this week. This and basically there's something for everybody. You know, whether you're a storage nerd like me, or whether you're one of those weird network people. There's all sorts of stuff.
Even those anti-social security folk. Anyway, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We'll be back, and we're going to talk about slop squatting. Okay, this sounds like something for Robert Reeves. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey folks, we're back and we're talking about this sloppo squat term that has been kicked around. It seems to be a cousin of typo squatting, but the idea here is that bad guys are convincing LLMs that a package may exist that the LLM then inserts into people's code or uses as a baseline to create some additional code. And surprise, there's malicious code injected into these applications that might be invoked later by somebody who has a command and control system for that thing. Robert, this feels like, a nightmare out of DevSecOps gone wrong with AI, but how serious an issue is this?
Not very. I think, look, we have had security injection challenges around libraries for decades. We've certainly seen people use social engineering as recent as year and a half, 2 years ago into the kernel. They caught it. We've certainly seen people hijacking JavaScript packages and those sorts of things. I don't see very much difference here. As far as if an LLM is hallucinating that a library exists, somebody creates that library, has base functionality for it, and then has some sort of way of injecting that into the system, phoning home, collecting data. That's the idea behind it, which is very similar to any other hijacking of another library. I think it's novel and unique, but I do think it points out a bigger problem, which is AI hallucinating that these things exist. And I would say that it is really about how you use AI for code generation. If you are using it to say, hey, I need to change I want to send all of my data in this service to an OTel collector, open telemetry collector. Great. Hey, Copilot, go ahead and add all the calls that we need to create this. And it'll do it. And it's wonderful at that. If you're using AI for vibe coding, where you're just like kind of interacting with the prompt, you've got the microphone on, of course, you've got a dark screen and you're listening to the Tron soundtrack. Great. Yeah, Huda, yeah, you're hacking. It's great. If you're doing these things for anything other than prototyping and wireframing, you're doing it wrong. I think it really elevates the conversation of what is AI's role today, could change later, but what is the role of AI in supporting coding and programming practices? Is it for this? Is it for that? But I do like the term. I like slop squatting.
It's catchy.
And I do think it's, yes, it gets press and it's wonderful. And I do like the fact that it is getting elevated and people are aware of it. But the bigger question, I think, and I'm curious what the panel here thinks, is like, what is the role of AI in coding? Is it something that should be putting out production-ready systems, as some executives might believe? Or is it something for product managers to try things out and figure it out? Maybe it's whiteboarding, but via vibe coding.
Well, I think the answer is today versus tomorrow, right? Today, maybe it is vibe coding. Today, maybe it is prototyping, experimenting, playing, maybe not production ready. I think the other big thing is no one in their right mind is just going to let AI do some code and hit the deploy button on it, right? Not without, well, Mike says maybe, but you know, you need humans.
I'm questioning how many of them are in their right mind.
Right.
So there you have it.
But you know, it certainly needs to be reviewed, tested, what have you, by humans. And maybe today anyway, again, the role of AI is better off testing code that humans generate.
Well, to that point, think about what the two things you just said, Alan. It needs to be tested, and AI is testing. It's true. A lot of people are using AI for QA and validation of code. Well, if you're using AI to generate code, and then you're using AI to QA and validate code, maybe there's a problem here.
That's definitely a problem. I mean, I think it's got to be one or the other. But let's be clear. The promise that all these tech execs you speak to, Robert, who want to get rid of their junior and intern developers and turn AI loose on it, the promise is there that it can do that sometime, some way, someday, right? Somewhere, I think, to quote a Barbra Streisand song. But that ain't today. That's the point I'm trying to make, is today I don't think it's real. But it's interesting, you know, it's why we can't have nice things on the internet. It's not even real yet. And already the bad guys are trying to not derail, but inject themselves into the equation.
Well, sure. There's always going to be crooks and criminals. And I'm happy that this has come out. I'm happy that we have people in this industry that are looking for these things. And I've seen, you know, AI hallucination myself. I never thought of it to use it in terms of like, oh, okay, let's start taking advantage here. I have used it I actually leveraged that hallucination for prototyping. At my last company, I was asking it, show me how Liquibase supports Couchbase. We didn't have Couchbase support. And I was curious, and it spit out documentation on how to do it. And I was like, well, this is a lie, because I know for a fact it doesn't. But then I was like, copy and paste, put into Jira. And
well, I got to tell you though, but I've seen college student hallucination too, right? Tricky Mickey, Lady Blue Fingers, and all of that good stuff. So, you know, why should AI be different? Hallucinations, you know. And,
have a good time. You have a good time, ChatGPT. Enjoy yourself.
Right, but I mean, all kidding aside, we've gotten better. We've gotten better with the hallucination stuff, I think.
Well, being aware of it. Remember those lawyers that were citing fake cases in court? They were ChatGPT.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But to that point, Bonnie, that's actually really smart. So take what's happening here with slop squatting, right? Okay, so somebody creates a library. So AI hallucinates a library that doesn't exist. Somebody creates that library as a malicious library, and then they use that to do basically to bring vulnerabilities into software. Slop squatting doesn't have to be software development. Think about what could happen, to your point, Bonnie, about somebody creating basically a fake academic paper based on a frequent AI hallucination, a fake court case. Imagine somebody creating, you know, a fake GitHub or a fake LexisNexis or something filled with fake court cases or fake, you know, academic citations or something, to basically just derail the process of humanity and culture as a whole. You know, if AI is going to say, you know, Bonnie wrote an academic article for when she was back at Princeton about such and such, and then somebody actually creates that paper, probably using AI in 15 seconds, and uploads that to something, then suddenly somebody's going to start crediting you with that idea. Slop squatting is way bigger than code.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
absolutely. It can be. You're right, Stephen.
So Robert, though, I kind of feel we maybe need to update our best DevSecOps practices for the age of AI? I think people are all over the place on this stuff. And is there something that should be done here in terms of having a moment where we, and this document would be a living, breathing thing because AI changes all the time. But I feel like we don't really have something that kind of tells people what's real and what's not.
Well, that's true. We don't. But we do have lots of options to validate the libraries that we're using and that we're pulling in to, and that our code depends on, because we have decades and decades of experience with that. I will say this, though. Actually, it might not be a bad thing for somebody to engage in slop squatting, because they'll have to build the base functionality of that library to actually work. And yes, there will be some security, there's some issues in there where they're stealing data or doing something bad. But at the very least, somebody could take that library and remove the bad stuff. And here you have the library working. Maybe I'm looking at this glass half full, but I do think that there is lots of great security practices in place today that we can take those approaches to this as well. We do have protection against naughty libraries that are, that we don't want to bring in. I'm reminded of the SolarWinds hack and, secure software supply chains. So those practices would hopefully protect us from this. And we would just have to apply it to this new vector of attack.
My issue with that is, so I can see a world where we're going to use AI to fix the code generated by the AI, but the thing that we're relying on to fix the AI is also flawed. So now I need another thing to fix the AI that fixes the AI. Where does it end?
Well, it doesn't. And that is what I call the circle of suck, and where it just feeds on itself and it just gets worse and worse. And it is, yes, it's going to be a challenge, but haven't we seen this pattern before, where things, we just start parroting things over and over again, with urban legends, and those sorts of things. Now it's just accelerating and gotten worse. And I do believe that we should be aware of it, but I am confident that my security colleagues are on this and that they can apply practices that they've learned from other issues and apply it here.
Very cool. Hey guys, I got to pull the plug. We've got a lot going on today on Techstrong TV. This has been a great gang. Bonnie, always great seeing you. We'll see you next week here on the gang. Stephen, I hope this AI infrastructure day, 4 days of it, is going to be as great as it sounds. We're looking forward to seeing that. Robert, we haven't got an update from you in a few weeks. What's going on in your world?
Well, I am just having a blast working with all of my friends in startups around Austin, around the country, and really enjoying spending time bringing that 1984 GMC Army Blazer back to life. It has just been...
For people who say, I'd like to pick Robert Reeves' brain, what's the best way to reach on LinkedIn, or what do you think?
Well, absolutely. I think LinkedIn is a great place. That's always respond there. And, certainly, I very much enjoy having a nice chat with folks and seeing how we can leverage open source to improve their business outcomes. I do think that there is, time and time again, we've proven that open source is the model for software development that works. And companies, larger enterprises, need to take more and more advantage of that, to avoid vendor lock-in, to have more people that they can recruit and retain. And certainly it's just cool, man.
I think Alan inadvertently gave the best advice in the entire show when he said, when it comes to AI, I got to pull the plug.
Well, that's one man's opinion. Stay tuned for a full day of Techstrong TV, including Tech Field Day, Infrastructure Field Day, today, tomorrow, Thursday, and I guess Friday. And Friday. All right. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel. Thanks for watching. We're out.